Born in 1949 in Long Island, Dave Stevenson spent his early childhood in New York. He was introduced to soaring by his father, Mike Stevenson, getting his first glider ride in 1960 at Middletown, New York. Dave quickly took to the air, first training in the early 60s in a J3 Cub and Schweitzer 222. Dave's first solo flight in a glider was in a 126 at the age of 14. By the time he was 16, he had completed his silver badge legs for duration and altitude. It was at the age of 17 that Dave began to leave his mark in soaring. Taking advantage of unusual conditions, he was towed 40 miles upwind from Middlebury, Vermont to the New York Adirondack Mountains in a Schweitzer 232. Once there, he released a mountain wave to a New York Junior multiplace altitude record of 12,700 feet, as well as a record gain of 6,200 feet, where he soared back 37 miles to Middlebury. Those records still stand. Dave moved west to Colorado in 1968 to attend college at the University of Denver. Dave received his Lenny Pin that year at Pikes Peak, reaching an altitude of 29,500 feet. In the summer of 1969, he finished his silver badge with a 59-mile distance flight originating in Santa Fe, New Mexico. During his college years, Dave received his commercial glider rating and worked for a commercial soaring operation, Gliders of Aspen. In 1971, Dave joined the Colorado Soaring Association at Black Forest Gliderport, an airport renowned at the time as one of the meccas of soaring. It was at Black Forest that Dave received his gold and diamond altitude badge legs in a wave flight to 32,000 feet. Dave worked at the soaring operation in Aspen for several years. It was in Aspen that Dave truly learned to soar. Finishing college and having some experience with commercial glider operations, Dave decided to purchase a plane and open his own commercial soaring operation in Idaho. In 1972, Dave purchased a new Blanik L-13 and aerotowed the glider from Houston to Colorado Springs, living at Black Forest and leaving the plane there for the winter. That following summer, Dave took his Blanik from Colorado Springs to Haley, Idaho, near Sun Valley. He obtained a glider instructor rating and opened a commercial soaring operation called Sawtooth Soaring. It was here that Dave honed his cross-country skills. He flew an out and return flight of 227 miles to Salmon, Idaho for his gold distance, diamond goal, and a state record. In 1975, Dave moved to California, closing his soaring business. This move marks the start of his entrance to glider racing. During winters at El Mirage, a dry lake, the locals held an event called lap races. They set up an 18-mile triangle and raced laps around a course handicapped by speed and distance. Soaring in the West would be good for Dave. He completed his diamond distance badge leg, flying 390 miles using the lift over the White Mountains, completing his diamond badge in a Schweitzer 123. In 1978, Dave entered his first sanctioned contest, the Western Region Sports Class, where he finished 14th out of 50. Dave came to Georgia in 1980 and joined the Mid-Georgia Soaring Association. A high point of this new membership was an expedition to Bluefield, West Virginia in the club's Pilatus B4 with Ellen and Lou All. In 1983, Dave took delivery of a new DG400. Some of his first flying in it was at a wave camp at Mount Washington, New Hampshire. Later that spring, Dave would fly Mountain Wave out of Andrews Murphy, North Carolina, flying to 16,000 feet. The following year, Dave had an incredible 700-mile flight. Originating in Flat Gap, Tennessee, Dave flew the mountain ridges up to Cumberland, Maryland, then returned to Knoxville, only to find out that his barograph had failed, nullifying the record flight. He would make up for it later that year by setting a national motor glider 500-kilometer triangle speed record at Odessa, Texas, at 73 miles an hour. Later that year, he went on to win the Region 4 South Championship at Newcastle, West Virginia in the motor glider class. 1985 ended up being a very similar year for Dave, starting with an aborted record attempt with a flight of 630 miles from Gate City, Tennessee to Bedford, Pennsylvania. Later that year at Peach State Gliderport in Williamson, Georgia, Dave would fly back-to-back 500-kilometer flights over Memorial Day weekend for Georgia state records. At Uvalde, Texas, Dave set another national speed record, this time for a 300-kilometer triangle at an incredible 79.99 miles an hour. The following year, 1986, Dave would enter his first national contest at Hobbs, New Mexico. Dave flew in the sports class in a borrowed Schweitzer 134 and finished 9th out of 45. In 1987, Dave flew his DG400 to another Region 4 South championship in the motor glider class. The next 3 years would see some remarkable achievements. In 1988, Dave flew the first 1,000-kilometer flight in the Southeast. Launching from Matthews Field in Whitwell, Tennessee, Dave flew up and down the ridges of the Sequatchie Valley, then took a turn downwind to the southeast, ending up at the Atlantic coast at Charleston, South Carolina, an amazing total of 681 miles. Later that year, he followed that achievement with a 410-mile goal flight from Monroe, Georgia to Winter Haven, Florida, a Georgia record that still stands today. Following these achievements, Dave took MGSA's Club Schweitzer 134 to Hobbs, New Mexico that summer to participate in the Sports Class Nationals. He took the championship that year, winning every single contest day. As well, he took his DG400 back to Texas that summer, and at Uvalde won the National Motor Glider Championship. 2 years later, Dave would repeat the championship 2 times, with back-to-back wins in 1990 at Littlefield, Texas, and then again at Marfa, Texas in 1991. In 1995, Dave flew a winning Hilton Cup triangle of 294 miles with Conrad Sechting at Albert Lea, Minnesota. This qualified him for a visit to the Hilton Ranch, where Dave, with his wife Meredith, flew a twin Grobe 372 miles, setting a national free out and return distance record. Apparently, Dave is not done. In 2002, Dave flew our own GTA schedule and is the champion of that series. In Lubbock, Dave flew his Foca to a 5th national championship, winning the sports class for that year. With over 2,700 hours in gliders, 50,000 miles of cross-country soaring behind him, 2 regional championships, 5 national championships, several state and national records, and the first of 4 1,000-kilometer flights in the Southeast, there is no dispute that Dave Stevenson has earned a place with the finest pilots in this country. Noting all of these accomplishments, we would like to welcome Dave Stevenson to the Georgia Soaring Hall of Fame.